All right, and okay, let's. I will move to my section about fusion financing. Do you see my slides? All right. This is so. First of all, a disclaimer. In the topic of fusion financing, I will talk about primarily financing of private and quasi-private companies, and not about financing of the public research institutions, any public initiatives like ITER, because ITER investments in total, it's already $20-30 billion. So we're talking about only, again, financing of companies. This is one disclaimer. Another disclaimer is that the topic of financing is very dynamic. So we already saw the news in the first half of January that number of fusion companies they got the financing from the new rounds. So the data that I will have here, that will present here, it's it's in different timing. So therefore, sometimes data cannot be comparable from slide to slide, but it will provide a general overview. The trends are the same. So here on the graph, there's presented the cumulative total financing of private and quasi-private companies. As you see here, until 2016, the financing of fusion companies there was very minor. It's only and only minor companies existed. Veterans, like basically two of these veterans, TAE and General Fusion, you saw they just recently came to public, and one of the core reason, just because they exist for too long, so there is a quite big pressure from the shareholders to get a return. So one of the reasons for them to go public is to provide the return for the shareholders who invested quite earlier in these companies. Another fusion company which exists for many years is Tokamak Energy, it's UK company. So as you see, not many financing of fusion companies until 2016. Until in 2016, TAE got a quite huge round for around 350 million USD. CFS came out from MIT, raised around 100 million in 2018, and then that's then mentioned today. They came out with mainly technology around magnets, and using this technology and validating the test of magnets in 2021, they were able to raise the largest round all the time until that moment among Western companies, 1.8 billion. And since then, number of fusion companies appearing almost each year, and the fusion financing growing almost exponentially. So by the end of 2025, the total estimate of the financing is around $17 billion, with a projected from Fusion X to reach by the end of 2026 in the range of 19 to 26 billion dollar. And again, many companies came out in the period 2025. We will talk about it a bit later. If talking about who, like where was investing distributed in which countries, and we will talk about this a lot. Notably, there are two main players in the field: China, which is red one, and the United States, which is green, followed by Germany, Canada, and the UK. China started to invest a lot since 2023. This financing presented here, it's equity financing. It's not presented by any public funds like grants. But this dynamic is it's very interesting to see the growing investments from China. Again, geography, which I mentioned, two big emerging hubs, US and China. So US is with more than 50% of the total worldwide, following by China, Germany, UK, Canada, and Japan. And there are a number of small investments in France, Sweden, Israel, and India. And then there's one startup in Australia and New Zealand. If diving a bit deeper to the specific region, FusionX identify three main regions in the US. Definitely Northeast with the Commonwealth. He's mainly represented by Commonwealth Fusion Systems, with more than $3.1 billion. Northwest Washington, led by Helion, Zap Energy, and Avalanche. Avalanche is Helion, it's a field reverse configuration. Zap Energy, it's so-called Z-pinch method, and Avalanche is, I don't remember actually, but they're building a small like tabletop device. The most diverse region in the US in terms of the approaches is from field reverse configuration like TAE to laser inertial confinement, Pacific Fusion Focus, CMR, and there are a number of other companies. Europe and then the United Kingdom, as mentioned earlier, the leading investor here is Germany. There are a number of German companies. We will see the approaches that they pursue. But basically, the motivation of Germany is they shut down the last fission power plant 3 years ago, and they're actively looking for new power source for the country. Because after the Russia-Ukraine war, gas supply and the gas played quite a big role in energy supply, so it's no longer the case. So with so heavy industrial country like Germany, electricity plays a big role. France, with the nuclear generation, with the fission generation, which contributes more than 80% to the power mix, they don't have a huge incentive to develop fusion. And also in France, they are building ITER, though it's international collaboration, but they may be more reluctant of fusion development also because of this. UK, one of the oldest player in the fusion field, with a number of fusion startups and that exist for quite many years, even decades, like Tokamak Energy, and UK. They have quite big support on the governmental level for many years, and they're planning to invest a lot also with the government support. China, there was a number of questions of China. They've been expanded. Might talk a bit about it. So China, as you saw, invested a lot in fusion. It's not big diverse of the technologies. The largest, the most widespread technology are tokamaks, so both Neo Fusion and China Fusion Energy companies with they attracted more than $2 billion each, and they both pursue tokamak approach. So other companies, they are with much less investments. What I want to mention here, we're talking about China, is that China, they're trying to, as many of you know, China, they don't have natural resources like gas or oil that's enough to satisfy their energy security. So therefore, they invest in a lot to many different advanced technologies, not only in fusion but also SMR, traditional fission, fastly developing solar and wind. So they are really pushing hard to achieve energy security. And here's the graph of the percentage of publications in the Journal of Nuclear Fusion. So as you see, a number of publications from the US based researchers is falling down, while in Chinese they're publishing a lot. And so it's growing, let's say, almost exponentially. No, it's also important to mention that the amount of investments that was mentioned about China, which is estimated around $6 billion US at the current moment in total, but it also doesn't account for public for some public research facilities. So, for example, here it's an image from the satellite. It's supposed to be laser inertial confinement facility. We estimate around $2 billion. So some people estimate that the total fusion financing in different technology in China already reached $10 billion, which is even more than all the Western world taken into account together. So looking at the investment by technology type, here I need to make a bit disclaimer that some companies, organizations, they may classify some fusion approaches differently. What I mean here is that magnetic inertial fusion, which is classified, sorry, field reverse configuration, which is classified here under magnetic confinement fusion, it's very often classified separately under magnetic inertial fusion. This data is from Fusion for Energy, so we'll take it as it is, but just for you to understand. So obviously the magnetic confinement with more than 10 billion euro investments, here's number represented in euro, followed by magnetic inertial fusion, alternative concepts, and inertial confinement. If diving deeper to what is represented by magnetic confinement fusion, obviously the tokamaks, but here is important to mention that here's only Commonwealth, which is more than $3 billion US, and 2 Chinese companies. So it's taking so other approaches. There's not any other tokamak companies, private tokamak companies in the world. Even in Europe, they don't have it. So magnetic confinement following by field reverse configuration, stellar rate, and spherical tokamak. If like looking at the what are the approaches represented in different regions, US is the most diverse region where represented all the possible approaches that may exist. China heavily focusing on magnetic confinement, and Europe choose or not choose, or just historically pursuing only magnetic confinement, which is represented by two stellar companies, and laser inertial confinement fusion, like Marvell, focused energy. If the next topic is about like basically who is investing in the fusion companies now, and there's three emerging models. So it's a purely public. Yes, sorry guys, if you can turn off mic. Can you please turn? Yeah, thank you. So public financing like in China, private financing like in US, it's represented majority by venture capital, as we will see later. And Europe, it's almost 50. It's not 50-50 here, but in some countries it's almost 50-50 coming, 50% coming from public in grants, and 50% coming from the private investors. Here's capital flow, and so basically the most interesting part here is that European Union has an overall negative cross-border investment balance. So it means that European capital support more companies outside of Europe rather than investors outside of Europe support European companies. It's part of this is that not many European companies, first of all, and the financing, the checks, they're much lower, much smaller, and with a quite broad, a lot of diversity in the companies in the US, where European investors participate a lot. So, and here is the graph that representing who is investing, who regionally investing in the companies in certain regions. Not with a big surprise, investors prefer to invest in the companies from their region, but the most interesting, who's the second investor, who's the second largest investor. In US, it appeared that Japanese companies, they are one of the most active investors in the field. I didn't mention this earlier, but Japan is one of the most active players from the both private and public sectors. Also, the main reason is that after Fukushima, they are really trying to find any new source of energy. So fission is really heavily regulated in Japan, and in fusion for Japan is one of the largest bet, and even the new prime minister that came in October, one of the main goals for the government for the Japan in the next years. So fusion is top priority for government for the development. So in US, the third largest one is the investor is European companies, and if you take a look on Europe, the second largest US companies, US investors, almost no investors from not almost no investors from Japan. It's quite interesting. While even in the UK they have Japan investments. Also, not a big surprise. He is investing to the European companies. So who's investing? And Germany, he is obviously leading because there's mainly startups in Germany, followed by France and venture capital investors from US. And one of the interesting topics, but what are the types of investors who are investing in fusion at the current moment? So PitchBook, those numbers changing almost each day. PitchBook provides that almost 800 investors in fusion at the current moment. But who are they? And if you will take a look on the profile of the investors, it's early stage, like high risk, high return investors, venture capital, early stage investors like angel accelerators and corporates. But even corporates here, they represented mainly by corporate venture capital arms. So all this together is giving to us more than 80%, which represent investors in the fusion still as high risk, high reward, early stage investors. Provided proof that technology is still on the early stage of the deployment. Though we see the growing contribution from institutional investors, government, and family offices. Who are the most active players? So, and there was a number of questions. Basically, this is the question almost always asked by people: where to invest? If you will have a chance to invest, where to invest? If to take a look on the most active investors from venture capital firms like Low Carbon Capital, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, They invest in a very diverse portfolio of fusion approaches. So low carbon, for example, they are one of the most notable investors in fusion. They invest in everything. They invest in magnetic confinement and laser inertial confinement, even in Z-pinch. So Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is, for some of you know, is for Bill Gates' company. It's also investing in diverse number of approaches, including magnetic Z-pinch and laser inertial confinement. So this doesn't help to you to say like which approach is the best. It's just confirmed that even from the investor side, there is no consensus, let's say, that one fusion approach will win. So therefore, the investors who wants for fusion to happen, they believe that diversification here is important. So some approaches like tokamak, they may win at the beginning. It also depends what do you mean under win. But other approaches they may win on the longer term development, let's say. So then we need to take to talk a bit about the motivation of each investor's profile. What we discussed is falling to this category. We see in family. Yeah, sorry. Can you mute? Can you mute Mike? Thank you. So investors, current investor profiles, they're following this category: venture capital, early stage venture capital, later stage VC, or corporate venture capital arms. So they have different profiles. So some of them they invest in much more earlier. Some of them based in the later rounds, which we will see later. But they still require substantial return on their investments from 3x to 100x for early stage. Though we almost don't see the low risk investors, sovereign wealth funds, project financing, infrastructure financing. Fusion for them, it's still early bet, and they are waiting for the technology to be de-risked, so for them to be able to invest. We want to highlight a bit for what this is a bit simplification. So it's like, or if you have fusion startups, what kind of, so on which stage, what kind of stages you have. So at the beginning, on the pre-seed and seed money, you have several founders, fusion scientists, engineers, or maybe a laser specialist. So they are raising money, not a lot, just to bring to build a conceptual design and to validate it either through publication, either through some scientific studies, research. Then for the series A, so basically what's for example, the most obvious example is CFS. What did they do? So basically they raised around 100 million for the conceptual design. So they validated the approach. They validated the magnets. So they built they ran a test for their magnets, which achieved 20 Tesla, which is substantial. And and using this fact, they were able to raise $1.8 billion on the Series A. And now they are building prototype with the Series B, and so the total financing to around $3 billion. But you also need to understand that $3 billion, it's not this money not to build only a prototype. They also will use this money for the first of a kind commercial power plant. They're using this money for the manufacturing facility. So it's not like $3 billion coming to build a prototype, but it's much more complicated let's say capital stack, finally using of money for fusion company. As I mentioned, it's interesting to take a look on but how the profile of the investors change with each round, and we see that on the pre-seed and seed stages, it's still a lot dominated by angels and VCs, which is 90%, and with smaller participation of other investors. And the more we are going to other rounds, which is de-risking, which as I previously described is like de-risking of technology, the more we see that early stage investors who wants high return, it's reducing, and the let's say like traditional investors, institutional investors, they're participating more and more. Notably, for the share of angels by Series B, almost so they almost disappear because they cannot afford. It's not in their mandate. They cannot afford the growing checks to keep their share, and they prefer to exit. So they already have substantial return on their investment. For reference, this is investment increase compared with previous round. And what I need to mention here is that most of the startups who founded in the last 4 or 5 years, they have not yet even reached Series B. So therefore, the data here represented by the companies who were founded more than 10 years ago. So we will see later in the coming years whether this data will be confirmed or not. But hopefully yes, because the pattern is clear. I will not stay here for long, so it's just the more we are going to each round, the more amount of the more it required capital. So Series A financing were 10 times more than required, 10 times more than was raised during seed or pre-seed. Same for Series B, required 10 times more than Series A. With the B and C or C and D, it's a lower amount in terms of not the lower amount. It's lower ratio, but still much higher than were raised in the previous round. I will probably pause. All right. So the last section is basically so we talked about the past, how much money was already deployed for the investors, but the question which constantly was asked like by many people, but how much money we will need to run the first of a kind, nth of a kind. So when we will have electrons in our house from the fusion power plant, and how much money we will need to do it. At the current moment, still like rough estimates. Of course, it's a lot of uncertainty, as you understood from all the discussions today. But anyway, we can provide some very rough estimates at the current moment. Fusion Industry Association ran the survey among the fusion startups in 2025. How much money you need to deliver first commercial power plant? In average, the response was on average 600 million. But if you will sum up all the responses, you will come to $80 billion. Remember this number. Of course, many fusion startups will not survive on the way. There will be only several, 5 maybe leaders who will come to this moment, but not all, like 20 or 30 companies, which is currently pursuing the goal to build a commercial power plant. So this is the estimate of bottom up. So what if you will take a look on bottom down. And there was interesting paper study, you may tell, from Creo Syndicate this September, who tried to build the model of how much capital stack will be required to build the first commercial, basically not the first, but to build the industry. They identified 4 major milestones: key component validation, scientific energy gain, first of a kind power plant, and commercial power plant. It's not mentioned here. It is to achieve commercial power plant stage. Creo Syndicate assumed that on the way they will be built 2 gigawatt of capacity in total. So it doesn't mean that it will be 1 power plant. It will be several plants on the way to build first of a kind and then commercial power plant. And how much? So in total it will be 2 gigawatts per player. So in Creo Syndicate, they estimate that for each of the milestone, it will require a certain amount of capital to be attracted. For the first milestone to be achieved, $300 million in equity. Majority of this money is coming from VC, from the grants. And most of the companies, they are on this stage. Not most, all the companies, I would say, on this stage. And the number of players here around 13, which we see. The next milestone, and it will be, we hope we will see the scientific energy gain to be achieved from number of fusion startups in the almost close future, 2, 3, maximum 5 years. At least the CFS, they're finalizing construction of the Spark, and will start to run experiments in 2027. Let's see. As I mentioned earlier, the Spark designed for the Q11, and this will be quite a significant milestone. So Creo estimates for each company it will require $2 billion. To build, let's say, to build the prototype. It's not power plant; it's prototype. So what, for example, what CFS is building, it's closed cycle. There is no any like breathing blanket, so you cannot breathe tritium. It's not connected to the steam power engine, but it's more validating of the queue inside the machine. And more, let's say, traditional institutional investors, they are coming on this stage. Corporate venture capital, some sovereign wealth funds. We see the participation of Singapore, Temasek, and in the investment in the fusion companies at the current moment. And we, as was mentioned today, we see that some of the companies, they started already to go to the public in this range. In December, TAE Technologies merged with another company, the Trump with the Trump company, and a week ago there was General Fusion, which came to public as well as Canadian company. The heaviest part in terms of the capital deployment is coming with the first of a kind and the commercial, and the Creo estimates to build first of a kind power plant. For each of these companies, it will be required almost $9 billion spread over equity, corporate equity, project equity, and then debt. And the more we are going to this path, the lower amount of companies, the small amount of companies will stay alive. And the risk, basically, it's changing from scientific and engineering in the key component validation, and it's going more to the execution and to the operating risk on the commercial stage. In the first of a kind, it is expected that more risk will be lowered and the other players will come, project financing, so again, like more sovereign wealth funds. And with the latest stage, which and they estimate here for the commercial power plant, it is for one company $17 billion. Though again, it's not to build one power plant; it's to build several power plants to test the technology, to validate, to bring costs down, to test different operational regimes, and so on. And the market estimate, so it's growing. It's from 40 billion at the current moment to almost 3 trillion at the commercial stage. This number, though, it's I would say different sources they have different estimates, but someone saying $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion. So it's sky's the limit. So you may tell the number you like, but the estimate is huge. And on this stage, lower risk infrastructure financing, project financing, sovereign wealth funds. The highest risk, as mentioned earlier, it will be between scientific energy gain and then first of a kind. How to attract project financing, which require lower risk, but the risk still will be high, and here we will see value of there for many fusion startups. If summarizing all of these assumptions, let's say, we will come to the number, and Creo is coming to the number of total capital stack that is estimated to be deployed from 80 to 120 billion US dollar. Part of this, from 25 to 40, it will be invested to the companies who will not survive. But it's providing to you the rough estimate of how tough it will be for many companies to raise the money, if at the current moment it is. And worth to mention here that we are talking about not China. There's no Chinese company. Here's purely Western. So if you compare with almost $10-11 billion invested in the Western companies, with $100 billion that required to build the industry, which is like 10 times more. These provide to you the level of understanding of how hard it will be for many companies to raise the money and to prove for the investors that risk is reducing. Though I have, let's say, bad news and good news here. Good news is that having competition is always good. Having competitor like China will force many governments, investors to invest in the fusion companies in the Western countries, because no any country can allow to stay behind of this fusion race. So it is from one side it's a bad to have China as a competitor. From another side, it will force fusion investing to come. Want briefly highlight what's happened in the 2 weeks of January. It confirms all the findings that I presented earlier in terms of two main hubs in the world, China, US, and you see Avalanche raised 15 million in the recent rounds, and Type 1 Energy raised $90 million also in January. And China, it's almost like a bit more amount. Chinese startup raised 143, a bit more than total US companies raised in January. So that's all from my side.